going to hit the record button. And David, we missed you last time, although obviously we had Les Mis references going along all the way, so that we felt we were somehow with you. But tell us about your Les Mis experience, how you feel about stage, play or book, etc.
Okay. Yeah, so I saw Les Miserables about 25 years ago, and I saw it 3 or 4 times up until 20 years ago. And I hadn't seen it for 20 years, went to see it obviously 4 weeks ago this evening. And when I first saw it, all the first times that I saw it, it was in the Palace Theatre, which is a big theatre, big stage. So it's a very big, bold, noisy, colourful production. And they've moved it down the road, down Shaftesbury Avenue, to a much smaller theatre and restaged it for the 21st century. I think it said in the programme. And it was still fantastic. I think a lot of Les Miserables relies on the 2 main characters, Jean Valjean and Javert, and the actors playing those 2 were absolutely superb. And so they carried the whole production. They were fantastic. Their singing was fantastic. Because it had been restaged for a smaller stage, there were fewer people in the cast. It wasn't as big. It wasn't as bright and colourful. And as part of the restaging, what they'd done is, and I bought the CD years ago, and I've listened to the CD hundreds of times. So I've got all the music in my head. And what they'd done is they'd changed some of it to be more conversational. So lines which were sung in the original production are now conversational within the songs. And I wasn't so keen on that, perhaps just because I'd heard a different version of it 200 times. That it just jarred with me a bit, but it didn't seem to work as well. Didn't make it as theatrical and as compelling, I don't think. But still fantastic to see it again after all that time. Still, the story was great, the music was great. Still lasts over 3 hours and makes your bum numb. But yeah, I had a really good evening. I missed you all, obviously.
Of course.
Lots of you all in the interval and that. No, I didn't think you at all. I just enjoyed it. Yeah, we had a great time. But it's interesting to see it restaged after that, reinvented in a way, and something that's gone on for so long can actually reinvent itself in a way and still be relevant and still play to full houses for that length of time. I think it's a sign of the power of music and theatre together in that space. You know, the shows like Phantom and Les Miserables and have been on for so long. With still playing to full houses, it's because it creates a magical experience when you're in that space. So if you're reading a book, the magic is happening inside your head and the author is remotely connecting with you. In a theatre, the magic is happening all around you, and you're connecting directly. If it's a good production, you're connecting directly with the performers on the stage. So yeah, I loved it. Highly recommend going to see it.
2 questions, David, if I may. Have you read the book?
Mm-hmm.
Have you read the book?
No, I haven't actually. That's quite interesting. I mean, I did a degree in French. It wasn't one of the books that we read at university. It wasn't on the syllabus. So no, I haven't read Les Miserables. I probably ought to.
Lady was reading it to her mum before, so I think we'll probably start it and read it again as a couple. And the other thing, we've got a copy of the original French concept album. If you'd like to borrow that sometime.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting because. Obviously they wrote the original concept album and then turned it into a show. And originally it was panned by critics, and it came very close to closing when it first opened. And they did rewrite it and rework it. But actually, once they'd done that and put it in front of audiences, it spread by word of mouth. But if it was just down to the critics, it wouldn't have lasted 2 months, let alone 35 years or been 40 years now, isn't it? I think over 40 years.
What do they know?
So, yeah.
and then. You picked up, I know Chris has got the book of the Spare, I believe, but you decided after our conversation the other month that you were actually going to read the Spare. So what was your take on it compared to what's been said in the media?
I think I wanted to read it because when it came out, there was a lot of, not just in Book Academy, there's in general on Twitter, which I follow, and in the media, there was a lot of talk about it and a lot of criticism of Prince Harry, of Harry and Meghan, of the book. And I thought, well, if you're going to criticize. You shouldn't really criticize a book if you haven't read it. You shouldn't really have an opinion about the book if you haven't read it. That's a bit like, I don't know, the Imams deciding that because Salman Rushdie had written a book called The Satanic Verses, that he ought to be sentenced to death without reading the book, just because of something they'd heard about it or what they thought it was about. So I thought, well, if I'm going to have an opinion about it, I ought to read it. And I like autobiographies. Read quite a few autobiographies, but I wouldn't have bought that one. It's not one. I'm not particularly interested either way in the royal family. I'm not a monarchist. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm not a Republican. I'm not bothered about the royal family, really. I don't find them that interesting. But I just thought it would be an interesting book to read. And it was, as an autobiography, and I know that an autobiography is by definition somebody's version of events. It's their side of the story. I think any autobiography is that. And this is Prince Harry's version of events, Prince Harry's side of the story, if you like. And if you see it as that, it is fascinating to get a glimpse inside what is quite a dysfunctional family, quite a unique family, and the pressure, just to put yourself in his position, in the kind of pressures that he had from losing his mum at a very early age, being, the things that I did as a teenager. If they'd then appeared on the front page of the newspapers, I think that would have been very difficult for me to cope with, the scrutiny that he came under, and then anybody that he came into contact with, particularly in terms of partners, girlfriends, the scrutiny that they and then all of their friends and their family came under. I don't think I could have coped with that kind of pressure. So you see that version, you get a glimpse into that. You get a glimpse into the royal family and what a strange institution it is, the set of rules that they follow in all the things they do, and the distance that they have between them. That he's never hugged his father. He's never. It's a very, very distant and formal relationship, and very, very formal relationships that everybody in the family has had with the Queen. So it's quite interesting to see inside that. And then as he grows up and as he develops and as he goes into the armed forces and it's an interesting story. I speak to my mother-in-law and she said, "Oh, I'd like to read that." So I sent her a copy from Amazon as well, and she's really enjoying it. She's taken a long time to read it, but she's saying that she loves it. Ultimately, it's the quickest selling fiction book ever. What's it sold? 3 million copies or something. That hasn't all been bought by people who don't like Harry or don't like Harry and Meghan. I think if you don't like them, you wouldn't buy the book. I think if you didn't like them and bought the book, it wouldn't change your mind. You wouldn't start liking him. I think if you like him and buy the book, you might like him a bit more by the end, because it's an interesting story and you see his side of the things. I enjoyed it. It was easy to read. It was enjoyable. It told me some things that I didn't know, and it was interesting to see that side of the story. So for me, it was worth reading. I enjoyed reading it. And one thing I didn't know, I don't know whether Dennis and Lady knew this, but Prince Harry trained as a helicopter pilot just up the road from Book Academy headquarters, about a mile up the road at Barkston Heath. So there he was. He was probably driving past your house, however many years ago that was, 15 years ago or whatever. So
and
there you go.
William as well trained there, didn't he?
Yeah.
All right. I didn't know that because he hasn't read the book, so I haven't read it.
All pilots, whether helicopter or fixed wing, have to train in fixed wing first, and then they do it. Lady's tale of Prince William going through graduation is that she had dinner with him. But that's another story. That's another story.
I also didn't recognise him and told him to move out the way, but hey ho.
And I love telling that story to people.
Right, brilliant. Thank you, David. Right, talking of books and members' books, you're going to hear from Sue. Sue, do you need to share the screen at all?
No.
Okay, Sue.
No.
What's happened recently?
You've stolen my thunder, lady, but never mind.
I'm sorry.
No, lady asked me if I'd do a 5-minute presentation, and I thought I'm not going to spend time putting together a slide presentation. I'm just going to tell you a story, because this is the sort of environment where we have stories. So I think you'd all agree that probably any creation starts with an idea, but I'm going to go even further back than the idea. So I'm going to tell the story. It's got 6 chapters, no, 7 chapters actually. And chapter 1 is where it began. And it wasn't with an idea that I was ever going to write a book, but about 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, I was gifted an Oxford Dictionary of Quotations, and I got interested in it, and my father devoured it. He loved reading and classical novels, as he kept telling me I should be reading rather than things like Louisa May Alcott and stuff like that. And so that was where my interest started in quotations. And I think I was also just interested in languages and communication generally as a means of connecting with people, and that sort of has transpired into what I now do, which is coaching and training, and a few other things beforehand, but language was always important in the work that I've done. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2 is the long dormancy. And I remember seeing once an amazing nature film. We've been talking about nature this evening, where one of the deserts in the world was barren completely, but then once every 10 years or so, they have a lot of rain, and all the seeds that have been planted from 10 years prior suddenly blossom, and you've got what looks like a very lush area. And so yeah, the dormancy was a bit like that. Nothing was happening overground, but I continued collecting.
Oh. So you seem to hit the mute button by mistake.
Where did you last hear me?
You were saying about the nature bit.
Okay, yeah. So yes, where something lies dormant and then suddenly springs into life because there is rain.
Yes.
Just wave at me if that happens again, because I'm flapping a piece of paper around here. So yes, and then there was a stage early on when I was training, where there used to be a lot of, this is pre-internet days, used to be a lot of those motivational posters that started popping up in businesses and offices and what have you. So those interested me, as did books, films, songs, magazines, anything really which just said something to me. So all over that period, I used to write things down and store them in scraps of paper, notebooks, wherever really. So that's the end of chapter 2. Chapter 3, the catalysts. So coronavirus and COVID-19 was a big change for everybody, I think, in just everything that we did. And one of the things that I started to do with all that spare time I suddenly had was have a bit of a sort out. And I started finding where all these things had been stashed over the years. And at the same time, I reconnected with Lady at one of the online networking events that more people were going to because they couldn't meet face to face and they needed something to do. And they needed to redesign their businesses. And then at about the same time, I went to a Yes Group meeting online with a lady called Sam Pearce, who wrote the book Stress-Free Self-Publishing. And I thought, oh yeah, that could be something I could do with all this spare time, but what on earth would I write about? The chapter 4 is conception. And I was taking part in a self-development course called Masterpiece, and suddenly thought, well, actually, I want to put these quotations together for myself, but maybe other people might be interested in them. So that's what I'm going to do my book about. Chapter 5, gestation. I'm getting close to the end now. Decided that I needed a proper midwife, so linked up with Lady and have really benefited from that time spent with her. So we had regular antenatal checkups. Started planning the nursery. It was to do with, well, what colour and what format and where's everything going to go. I did my exercises, things like all the forms that Lady was encouraging me to fill in, and documents and keyword searches and things like that. Went to antenatal classes because Lady and Abby Rose both put on some really good sessions which were helpful. I had to open publishing accounts, so that was like the hospital visits. You just sort of take a peek in to see what it's going to be like when it actually happens. And then chapter 6 was the labour. This was the really hard part. Proofing and checking. Oh, I just got so fed up, all of those pushing things that I had to do. Navigating Ingram Spark, that was interesting, lady, wasn't it? And then battling with the Amazon categories, that was one of the last pushes. And then the final result, if you want to hold up the book now, lady, that's what popped out at the end. And so I was just so excited at the beginning of the week when I had my my proper copies. So that was chapter 7, the result. And then finally the appendix, well, what happens next? Because despite all the good advice from Lady, and she put me in touch with Karen, I didn't prioritize any pre-publication promotion or anything like that. So at some stage I've got to get birth notifications out. And probably have some sort of christening party or a launch event. So that is the birth of a book, my whistle-stop tour of over 40 years of work. So thank you so much, Lady and Abby Rose, for all of your support. It's really been invaluable, and I couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you. Well, you can have this recording as well to use for your marketing. So that would be just brilliant. But yeah, so if you want to quote on laughter, on the natural world, as we were talking, give us one of your quotes from the natural world. So as that's particularly pertinent, our natural world. Anyone you like. And you're still on mute.
Earth laughs in flowers.
And that's by
Ralph Waldo Emerson. One here by Albert Einstein. Look deep into nature and then you will understand everything better.
And the rest you put in the chat the Amazon link, because that's how you read the rest of the book. Yay!
Let me just read you the last one in that section, and the last one in the book, actually. This is by Saint Augustine, and he was sort of pre the birth of Christ, I think. The index at the back gives you a little bit of information about all of the quotees, as we've called them, their dates when they lived or are still living, and where they lived, or where they were, what their nationality was. So it gives you an idea of their background. But this is the very last one. Men go abroad to wander at the heights of mountains, at the huge waves of the sea, at the long courses of the rivers, at the vast compass of the ocean, at the circular motions of the stars, and they pass by themselves without wandering.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, one of the things we talked about last month was reviews and book reviews. And Heather's come up with something, so I'm just going to pass to Heather. And you're on mute. I thought we'd stop saying you're on mute, but we're still saying it.
No, there we go. Let me just put that on the slideshow. So I found out about this gentleman, Dean Rhodes, and he was diagnosed with MS. So he had to quickly change his career from a clarinetist, that's not easy to say, I'm going to need David for a few things in this today, and changed his career to a certified public accountant, and worked his way up to the top of the field. But after he retired, he was confined to a wheelchair with his MS. It got so bad he could only move one little pinky finger. But he took it upon himself to read all of the greatest classic literature, completing 168 novels and writing a funny one-line synopsis of each. And he did the same for all of the Shakespeare plays. Now, he used a Kindle, but he sometimes had to ask his devoted wife, 43 years, to turn the page for him. But he did keep on reading. So I thought I would share with you a few of his one-liners. So I picked out the books that I thought most of us may have read. So Moby Dick's the first one, and as we all know, it's about Ishmael's narrative of the maniacal quest of Ahab, the captain of the whaling ship, for vengeance against Moby Dick. And what did Dean Rhodes say? He said, all things whale.
Okay.
So David Copperfield, again, a novel. And again, we'll need David for the Bildungsroman to explain that one. Narrated by the epitomous David Copperfield, detailing his ventures. And it's meant to be a bit of an autobiography of Charles Dickens himself. What did Dean Rhodes say?
Long and boring story about David. Oh, okay.
It is all about David. War of the Worlds, and I think most people who have ever been interested in sci-fi will have at least thumbed through this and listened to the radio play if they can. And it's a brilliant first-person narrative of an alien attack on London. So after interstellar strategic planning, Mars decided to conquer the world by invading the island of England.
Has he put this all in a book himself now?
I will reveal at the end, lady. Yes, Robinson Crusoe is a novel, yeah, and I think we all know this as the autobiography is meant to be. When it was first presented, it was said to be written by Robinson Crusoe, and he had to change it and say it was Daniel Defoe that had written it. He revealed himself as the author. But what did Dean say? He said, "Don't travel with this guy."
What we got
we did do the Shakespeare plays as well. So one of them, obviously, Othello, the Moor of Venice, which is one I've just recently seen, the National Theatre version of this, and it really portrayed the racism and misogynism of the time. But most of you will know it's about Othello. He's just recently married Desdemona, and Iago, his evil sidekick, goes around shaking a piece of cloth and hiding it in different places in order to make Othello very jealous. And unfortunate end in that he kills his beloved wife. So what did Dean say? Since handkerchiefs play such a prominent role, it's lucky no one had a cold. A Midsummer Night's Dream, a brilliant comedy set in Athens around a marriage of two people. There's two subplots that meet together. So you've got 4 Athenian lovers, you've got 6 amateur players rehearsing a play, and they meet together in a wood and things happen. Magical stuff happens. What did Dean say? Very mismanagement leads to complications.
Good.
Now, there are more of Dean Rhodes' one-liners to be found on that link. I will put it in the chat after this, but I think it's over to you. Can you write some one-liners about the books that we've read at Book Academy? Now, I've done a couple to get you started. Here we go. Flowers for Algernon, short story. We've all read it and we've found it's uncomfortable reading, but we've done it, yeah? So my one-liner for this is, man or mouse, intelligence is not always worth seeking.
Yeah, good.
And Murder Most Festive by Ada Moncrief. We had that over Christmas, yeah? And my one-liner for this one is, reading most tested. That's it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So yeah, I think Facebook at the ready. Put in what you think, and I think I might contact our Scottish friend as well, because it's the sort of thing I think he would be great at, and it can come back and do an appearance on it, on that sort of thing.
I think so.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Right, we're going to have a 5-minute break now.
Before we do,
Yes.
can we do the photo of this so we don't forget?
Oh, thank you. Good idea. So if I just have to find the right book. Here we go. And obviously poor old Dennis hasn't got it because we have one between us.
Should photocopy it.
Photocopy it, that's breaching copyright, can't do that. Would you like to take who's taking the picture? Dennis, can you take the screenshot, or Kaz?
Okay, I can. Hang on.
Jeez.
They squeal, crawdad, squeal.
Yeah, squeal the crawdad squeal. Sing.
Done.
Done. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, so shall we come back at
10 past.
8? And if anyone wants to stay and chat with whoever stays, do. And if you come back early, that's cool too.